Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of What in the World podcast. As we continue to explore things local and global, I'm Alan Weber, sitting here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. For those of you who don't know me, I was the founder of Fast Company magazine and recently completed 8 years as the mayor of Santa Fe. And joining me are two of my old and dear friends in Copenhagen. Uffe Elbaek, also a former elected official and the Minister of Culture for the country of Denmark and founder of the Chaos Pilots Design School, one of the best schools for the world, not in the world. And Thomas Plotzeneder in his mountain cabin in Austria,
Hi.
watching the World Cup from on high in the Austrian Alps. Thomas is a consultant, a writer, a thinker, a political advisor, and our expert on the Catholic Church as well. So he's a man of many talents. Welcome to my two friends. What makes this podcast a little different from others is we're not talking as journalists. We're not talking as ideologues. We're not talking as people with an argument to win. We're talking as dear and good old friends who are thinking about what's going on in the world in a thoughtful and considered way and trying to make sense out of it. So please join us and tell your friends, spread the word. I think this podcast has a lot to offer. I thought we'd start this morning because we're here in the U.S. And in North America. We're all glued to the World Cup. And Thomas, Austria is competing. Congratulations!
Yes,
I
thank you.
think you're tied for the lead in your group. Denmark didn't
Well,
make it this year, Uffe, but we're indebted to Denmark for introducing a rule change in 1992 after winning the World Cup by passing the ball back to the goalie repeatedly and in taking all the air out of the ball so that they could win the World Cup. So you have a history with this particular competition. What does the World Cup look like when you're watching it from Denmark or Austria? Are people enjoying it? Does it bring people together? Is it a moment of happiness in a world where we seem obsessed with war and inflation and politics? Can people rally to something more positive around sports?
Uwe, you want to start or should I start?
Yeah, give it a shot.
Me?
What do you? Yeah,
Uh,
what do you think, Thomas?
well, well, I think it's huge. I mean, football is, or soccer as you call it, is huge, and it's the first time since 28 years Austria is participating in the World Cup. So it's even bigger for us. But even when we do not participate, it's a big thing. It's a fire camp. I mean, it's what used to be big TV series in the 70s. That's now soccer, football. Everybody get us together, public viewings, families, and the next day you talk about it in the office or at work. Actually, I think it's a good way to bring people back from home office, from remote work, because which is an issue for many companies. Because now they do, they watch the soccer game together, and the next day they are in the office to talk about it. I think I mean I'm particularly not a great football fan, but I get sort of the the movement and the spirit within the whole thing, and it creates a moment of joy and togetherness, if you want. So and a good part of competition in a positive way, and it's for the, sort of the maximum of nationalism I can agree on. As far as and it's almost like a filter. That was the original idea of the Olympic Games. I mean, to compete on sports grounds and not on battlefields, and that in this case it's fantastic. It's great. I also know that from facts and figures, it always is good for the world economy when there is a soccer World Cup because people consume more. They are more optimistic. They enjoy. They're spending more and invest more in this time, which is amazing. And then afterwards, when we
They drink more beer, Thomas, for sure.
definitely more beer, and they eat more. And then you have to be careful when it's over. There is always sort of a collective depression almost for it, 1 or 2 weeks, because something is missing. This evening events are gone. The topic is gone. There is it's way back. What is a little bit an issue is that because it's now in Mexico, in Canada, and in the US, the time difference is a little bit of a problem because it's not primetime TV when those games are. This is a sort of a little bit of a disadvantage regarding the fire camps. But overall, it's a huge event. It's very important, and it's a great piece of joy.
How's it look in Denmark, Uffe? Your team is not competing this year, but they've got a lot of history and there's a lot of joy around football in Denmark for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. But of course, there's another dynamic if you have your national football team playing, or if you have not. So I think that people are into it for sure, and then it will start to heat up when we are getting closer to the finals. So we know who to support, and actually, it's also an interesting psychological dynamic that it's not your own team you have to support, but actually you have to decide which other team from some of the other countries that you would like to support. And I'm always a big fan of the French team or the Portuguese team. But let's see where it goes. On a more serious note, I think that the discussion in Denmark up to these big sports events has have a double edge, so to speak, because there is the joy around the team and the competition and the game. So that's always nice to be in a stadium where we are all into it together. But the other side, and that has been for sure a discussion, not only this year, but also 4 years ago, and it comes up every time we are closing into a World Cup or European Cup, is the whole economic and political drama behind the stage. And there's a huge criticism towards FIFA, the organization FIFA, who is the organization who is doing these World Cup events. And everyone who looks into FIFA's history knows that it's extremely corrupt, and they are placing these World Cups in countries that for sure is not something you want to support. Last time it was Qatar in the past, and we are looking into that. I think it's in 2034. It will be Saudi Arabia, etc. So there's a big discussion about is this big commercial business, which is corrupt, and I'm not saying it's not my personal opinion. I think it is, but you can actually actually check all the legal cases that have been running, and the investigation into FIFA's employees and leadership. So there's something about the setup of the whole event that there's a real danger that it will kill the soul of the sport. And I think that's the more serious part when we talk about World Cup and how to look at it or relate to it. And so it's yeah.
That's always a part of it. There's when money is on the table, then you have people competing for things other than for the sport. On the brighter side, I've been noticing a few things that I think are worth commenting on as well. First, you've got four countries that have never participated before suddenly in the World Cup. So I think that's a really terrific example that sport inspires countries to try things, to mount a team, to build players, to really give their sports people a shot at participating. For the first time, there are 10 African countries in the World Cup. That's a record of participation. You're right, Uffe. there's a temptation, particularly if you're an American and soccer is not our football, European football or whatever you call it, is not our natural sport. There's a tendency not to pay that much attention to what's going on in the rest of the world. And we know the French are strong, and the Germans are strong, and the Brazilians and the Argentinians and the traditional greats. We saw Messi score a hat trick in the first game.
Mm.
We Americans know that level, but we don't really know, historically at least, about the teams that are up and coming in other parts of the world. So you see upsets too. Not only 10 African teams, 4 new teams, but you see Portugal being tied. You see Spain being tied by smaller countries and countries that are not powerhouses. And there always is the sort of the dark side, the shadow side to these activities, whether it's the World Cup or the Olympics. But by the same token, if you get caught up in the moment, the sport, the athletes, the competition, the good sportsmanship that you see on display by fans too. There was an editorial in
No, but
the
I agree. I agree, Alan, that the sports are able to lift people in a way that is extremely beautiful. You also saw it just recently in New York, when after many, many years, there's finally won, and how that played out in the streets, and there's this hunger or longing for being part of a collective moment of joy, and that is when the sport is most important. But I think that there's, at least if you ask me how the debate has been in Denmark, there is this. One side, we love the players on the field, but for example, when the World Cup was in Qatar, and you knew that the stadium was built by slaves, or what the word would be in English, that foreign workers coming in, and how many who died because of they had to build this stadium and build these fields. So yes, there's the light side and the dark side, and at least when you ask me, Alan, what is the discussion here in Denmark? It's both. There's both the support and joy for the collective moment, and then there's a even stronger and growing focus on what is the context, why, how does politics spill into the event, what is economic dilemmas, what is why do some countries get allowed to have the next World Cup and who's not, stuff like that. And especially it has been interesting from Denmark to see that the World Cup in US was decided when there was a good relationship between Mexico, US, and Canada. And now when it's happening, there's this drama, underlying drama between the 3 host countries. So I'm just trying to nuance the story, and take one step deeper.
yeah,
I'm totally with you. A question to Al. I think that's an interesting point. When they decided that the World Cup will be done in Canada, Mexico, and the US, obviously we're living in totally different times. Now it's happening. Do you see from an American perspective that the countries are getting closer because of that event now? Or is it just not relevant?
I think at the moment that's a subsidiary issue. I think what we've heard about in the U.S. press at large is things like the Iranian team being sent out of the U.S. down to Mexico for their training and feeling like they're being treated unequally. So politics is always a part of this. I mean, let's be honest. When you look at who's sitting in the stadium, in the boxes, in the guest boxes, it's always the big elected officials or their surrogates. there's a political element to all of these global competitions, whether it's the Olympics or the
Yeah.
World Cup or others. I don't think, Thomas, that at the moment there's a warming of political feeling among Canada, Mexico, and the United States based on collaborating. Oddly enough, what we're seeing in the U.S. in political terms right now is President Trump and the Senate Republicans having a spat. So there's a new, the game keeps changing. If you think of politics as a game, the arena keeps
Yeah.
changing. Where you're looking, it's not always the same part of the playing field. Sometimes it's in our cities. Sometimes it's in the U.S. Senate with Republican on Republican violence going on, and
Mm.
it's not a particularly healthy. The reason I think the fun part of the World Cup dominates at least my mental space is because the rest of it is so ongoingly, relentlessly a downer with very little, very little to be optimistic about when it comes to the addressing of serious problems. The stuff you're talking about, Uffe, that are always there, the systemic issues that are always present. And so the World Cup, at least in the U.S. right now, and you're right about the NBA championship, the New York team winning after a 53-year drought is a at least for New York and the fans is a huge deal. Um, Not all of us are New York Knicks fans. I should put in a little asterisk at the top. But you do admire the spirit that comes out when things are optimistic for a change. We're stuck in the mud here so much of the time, emotionally, politically, psychologically. Um, you know, the relief, I think, of a summer sports event that is optimistic uh, gives us a little bit of something to feel good about. And you're right. There's always the dark side, but and it'll come up. It'll come up at some point. What happens next? How do people respond to the
Trump started
outcome?
his own arena for his birthday in front of the White House, right?
Well, he had his own. Yes, he had his own celebration with muscular, sweaty men beating each other up. Uh, Uffe, to your point about corruption in the World Cup, he won the FIFA Nobel Prize for peace.
Yeah.
So FIFA invented a peace prize so that President Trump could feel good about himself. So all of this is theater. It's political
Nobody
theater
wants to
rather.
follow that prize as a second receiver.
We also had the Obama dedication of
Yeah.
the Obama Center in Chicago,
Yeah.
and that also, for many people, was a return to a better a better vibe, a better sensibility, with people being hopeful. We had President Bush on stage with, and apparently President Bush and the Obamas have formed a friendship that reaches across political aisles, which you don't see enough of in our country. People become it's a blood sport. It's not a good sport. It's more gladiatorial, and you don't
There
see
was an
these.
interesting remark by Peter Sloterdijk, who is a German philosopher. You might know him. He's one of the big living German thinkers, and he made the comment that this event in front of the White House with the wrestling competition and all this kind of stuff, he compared it to the Nero Games in Rome after the Republic, and he said it's a sign that of the last phase of the American Empire going down, because the gladiator games, they were in sort of in the last phase of the Roman Empire, not at the beginning, not the Republic, not even with Augustus, but only when the corrupt Caesars were in power, they started these games with and he said he saw a parallel there. Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard people in the U.S. writing that we're really in serious trouble when President Trump brings his horse into the Senate and tries to get the horse uh, appointed to a cabinet position like Caligula did with his horse. But we
Yeah.
haven't reached that. we're not quite there yet with horses and Caligula, so I wouldn't be ready to ring the rise and fall of the Roman Empire quite yet. But it's we're in troubling times politically everywhere. We talked about that last episode where Uffe, you were describing the political situation in Denmark, and Thomas, you're concerned about the rise of the right in other parts of the European geography. Let's switch gears a little bit. We talked.
Alan, maybe just to follow up on our last discussion, we have got a new government in Denmark now. So
Okay. I thought you were going to say before we leave the World Cup, we should all make a prediction as to who's going to be the ultimate winner. Do you know
yeah,
in your heart?
let's wait on that. But I'm really happy on behalf of US that your team has actually started in a very good way. Congratulations for that, because yeah, you call it soccer in Europe. We call it football, but so football is our normal national game, but it's not yours. And I'm just happy that your team came out so good as it did from the first game. I'm really happy about it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
also the
Yeah,
second game against Australia.
yeah. We are all kind of dancing on air right now because typically we have high hopes going into these competitions, and then something happens. There's we score an own goal or God knows what, and in this in this particular competition, the manager has chosen a good team. The players seem to be totally melded together. There's something I think what I love about sports and about all the jobs I've ever had in my life. They're team sports. They're a team sport, and this is what we saw with the New York Knicks. It's what we see with the current U.S. men's team. The players genuinely like each other, and the culture that the coach or the manager has built with the players is a culture of mutual respect, collaboration, support, everybody pulling in the same direction. And whether you're talking about a business, Thomas, that you consult to, or Uffe, the work you did in the Danish Parliament, it's a team sport, and you've got to build the culture of success and the culture of mutual respect, of people all pulling in the same direction. When you do that, whether you win ultimately the championship or not, you have people rooting for you because they see how much you are united in your effort, and that builds social capital and
Yeah,
social
yeah.
support. It's a beautiful thing when you see it, whether it's a U.S. team or a Congo team or Cape Verde. Uh, uh, you love it when you see it, and it becomes a magical moment for people to enjoy. So
Yeah.
thank you for the kind words. We are a little bit walking on air right now. So let me switch gears briefly because we're going to run out of time, and you guys have serious thoughts about serious matters, and I love the different perspectives that come into play. Um, you and I we talked as a group off camera a little bit about this cover story that was in The Economist about the rise of Gen Z socialism. We've seen the mayor of New York, who's a Democratic socialist in the United States, the mayor of Seattle, a woman who is also a Democratic socialist. Uh, the question about younger generations around the world losing their faith that capitalism, and there are many different forms of capitalism, the US system is not the only one, but in general, people thinking this isn't working. We have on the left Bernie Sanders and others saying the system is rigged. On the right, Donald Trump, or Donald Trump isn't on the right, but Donald Trump appeals to people who are on the right, saying the system is rigged. The same language with different remedies. Um, is there something going on that needs to be addressed seriously about the failures of capitalism, the rise of the billionaire boys club all over the world, the United States. I guess Mr. Musk is the first trillionaire on Earth. How does it look from Austria and Denmark? And you have, I think, you two have very different opinions about this. But Uffe, why don't you kick it off, and then Thomas, you can come in and provide a different commentary. Uffe, what do you see happening?
I see many things happening at the same time, to be honest. But when it comes to the way you described how a lot of young people feel, I think that it's not only young people who feel that. It's a much more broader conversation. And for me, myself, the older I get, the more flaming anti-capitalist I get, to be honest. And then I have to put a bit of context in here, because I've always been an entrepreneur. I'm building stuff from when I was a young man, and but what I have understood now, and just so the viewers know how old I am, I'm 72. The older I get, I actually can see that all what I have been involved in and been building has been new building blocks to another kind of a system, that the present economic system. And I really think that it's true when Einstein said that you can't solve the problem with the same thinking that has created it. You have to talk about the elephant in the room, the way we have organized our economic system and ownership to our common resources. We have to talk about how could a new post-capitalist society look like. And every time you step into this discussion, all the old issues are coming up. Oh, you think like state socialism in former Soviet Union, or whatever you can come up with. But I think that we have to look into a completely new economic system that respect that we can't use more resources than we are regenerating. And that goes both to nature, but it also goes to the way we treat humans, human people. So what I can completely identify with the way you describe these young people and their frustration. And what I'm doing in my daily work today is to try to support a new system coming up, who is creative, entrepreneurial, but organized in a different way as the you normally organize companies. So, Alan, you know that, and you have also met Anita Roddick, who founded the Body Shop, and you know the way she described the three bottom line economy, that it's not enough that there's positive figures under the economic bottom line. You also have to have positive figures under the green bottom line and the social bottom line. And in Denmark right now, among a lot of people, not only among young people, but through generations, there's a discussion: how can we redefine our economic system so it respects the planet and all the species that we are sharing the planet with, and create a much more democratic ownership, so no one should be able to own the common good, which means land, water, energy, stuff like that. We have to organize it in a different way. So this is actually a very serious discussion in Denmark. In the papers, newspapers, at the universities, in the media, there's a discussion about, can we imagine another future? Can we imagine another economic system? And no one has the specific name. So you have the old guards of socialist figures. You named Bernie Sanders, but just so the viewers again understand, this is much more nuanced discussion in Denmark about how can we imagine and how can we respond to the urgent needs of a radical change. Because if we continue in the direction we are right now, then we will end at the very wrong station and platform. Because we're killing the planet. It's obvious. Right now there is 35 degrees Celsius here in Denmark. In France, you have even more high temperatures. So the whole climate collapse and climate situation have to force another way of understanding the way we organize society and organize our economic system. And many times, and I'll end with that, many times when you talk about economic system, you go directly to the question about ownership and profit and sharing, and that's part of it. But just beside that, there's a discussion about how can we live a much more meaningful life, where there's not so much inequality in society as we see it. It's completely like sci-fi that Musk owns so much as he do, and how all the money goes into his new venture. So we have to live. We have to be able to imagine another way of living, and that's maybe the most serious part of it, because our collective imagination, the ability to imagine another way of living, is really not that strong, because it's like, and if you talk to young people, it's very difficult for them to imagine something better, because they are under such a pressure, economically, mental, etc. And I think that we're in a situation for the first time that the next generation can't expect to get a better living than their parents. So it's a serious issue what we are dealing with here.
Yeah, Thomas, tell me what you see and how you think about it. You have a very different background than Uffe's in terms of consulting to large and successful businesses, trying to guide them forward. But it also includes some of the same concepts around being good corporate citizens, recognizing the interplay between successful business enterprises and the larger community that they're a part of. What's your take on this challenge that I'm going to make it a young person's challenge, but Uffe's right. It doesn't limit itself just to that generation. There's a lot of concern about the way the game is being played right now, and I'm not talking about the World Cup, the way the world's resources are being used, the
And I have
growing
even a
disparity.
T-shirt here called, and I have even a T-shirt saying "Game."
Yes.
And Alan, do you remember you had a tagline on the Fast Company called "Change the Game"? And I think that is exactly what we're talking about. Are we able to change the game?
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, what's your take?
Yeah. Well, I would. There's a couple of things. I mean, I would paraphrase Churchill's thought that democracy is the worst way of a political system, but there's no better one. And I think I would rephrase that with capitalism. Of course, there are many disadvantages of capitalism, but I think it's the best way we go forward. And we have to distinguish between European version of capitalism and American way of capitalism. We have welfare states. We're obviously with all the disadvantages of the welfare states and with all the disadvantages of the European, with all the regulations. But there are, I think, the European way of capitalism, you can even discuss if it's still capitalism, but there is some elements of capitalism. I mean, I totally agree that everybody has to have the same chances. We have to invest a lot in education. Everybody has to have a very good social and health system, as we, I think, have in all European countries, at least within the European Union. This is not the case in the US. And I speak of personal experiences. I would like to give two examples. I'm the chairman of an NGO which is doing development aid in Africa, and I'm quite often there. And when you see the so-called informal settlements there, which is a nice word for slums, and Nairobi is 70% slums. There are people who go to Nairobi who don't even see one kind of slum because you can actually travel there without seeing it. But when you're in there, your first instinct is to just throw money at the slum and give, make housing, give people food, nutrition, and everything, and education. And obviously, you have to have money to change the situation. However, my experience is it is the most important thing is to give people education, and also sort of almost force them then to work. If they don't work, it doesn't. They are still dependent on the welfare or the money you give them. I have a personal experience with a young refugee in Austria who came in the Syrian crisis, when the Syrian crisis came, the big refugee crisis in Europe in 2016. And then he was a young guy, 17 years old. And a friend of mine said, "Okay, can we help him?" So I helped him and gave him shelter in my old boarding school. He could stay there. And then after, and he had enough money to survive, and not very bad way. And then after a couple of months, I said to him, "Listen, we have to make a plan that you yourself get out of this situation, because what if something happens to me, or if the school doesn't give you shelter anymore, you are in big trouble, and you have no idea what to do." So I said, "Come up with a plan. Take 2 weeks and come up with a plan. And if it's not completely unserious, I would accept it." And he came with a plan, and it was a 5 years plan. And he had a job as an IT trainee. He made this education. I supported him as long as the education was ready. After 5 years, he didn't get any money, and now he's working for the IT department of the Viennese airport. And he is self-sufficient. He can work on it for his own money. He can even help his family, and so on and so on. And I think if he just would live on welfare state, of course it's theoretically possible, but first of all, it's about self-esteem, and second of all, he's dependent on the state. Now he's not dependent on anything. He could even move to another country. He could go eventually back to Syria, or stay here. He speaks now German. But I think you have to empower the people to make their own money, and the circumstances of the state should be that they should make a framework that everybody could be his own entrepreneur in his own way, his own pilot of his life. Having said that, I know some people it will be very difficult, and for some people it will be impossible. And yes, this is where the welfare state comes in. And if you're not able to do it, then the state must help those people. But if you're not willing to do it and you are able, then I think then capitalism should bite. It's difficult to say this in 5 minutes, but I think this is in a nutshell my opinion.
Uffe, what do you think?
Oh boy, I would like to ask you a lot of questions, Thomas, here, because I have an assumption right now that when you talk about the welfare state and how people can be addicted to just get social welfare, that is something to do with a new economic system. For me, that has nothing to do with a new economic system. For I totally believe that the market will always be there. It has always been there. We have always been trading goods and stuff. So the market will be there. It's what I'm talking about. How can you actually create an economy and the economic system and a way of organizing that all the way down to ownership that actually get people much more involved and responsible for their only livelihood. And so I'm not the one who's the supporter for a bigger state. at all. What I'm much more advocate for is how can we, and that maybe we talked about it or touched it in some of our previous conversation about what I call the fourth sector, which is a new way of organizing our institutions and businesses that we take the best from the private sector when it comes to economic understanding and efficiency, and we take the best from the public sector when it comes to invest in common ground, so to speak, or purpose, and then the best from the civil society when it comes to purpose-driven organizational culture. And I think that at least that's how I talk about it and how I see it, is that we have all the big problems we have is problems that what I call the problems without a passport, problems that are cross-sector and cross-national state issues. And so the private sector in itself can't solve it. The public sector in itself can't solve it, and the civil society in itself can't solve it. So we have to, because it's hybrid problems, and hybrid problems has to be, we have to fix it with hybrid solutions. And then what kind of organization is then needed? We need to invent a new kind of understanding about organizations and how we organize our business. And that sounds maybe something very futuristic, but actually, if we look back in history, at least in a Danish context, then I don't know if the internet is going down here in Denmark, but anyway, I hope that I'm still on air. But there was a moment around 1900 where you suddenly saw thousands of new co-op businesses popping up, and that was owned by the workers, and it was owned by the members, and it has a completely other way of sharing the profit and investing and stuff like that. So that's where I'm speaking from, and it has nothing to do with a bigger welfare state. What I totally agree with you, Thomas, about we have to offer education. That's the big problem with the U.S. is that you have to pay so much money going to universities and colleges, and people are drowning in debt. And compared to in Denmark, you actually get money to go to a university. It's a completely different way of organizing our society, and I think that that's one of the big issues in US, that so many young people can't get their daily life together because of all the debts they have.
I think there's, if our dear friend Oscar Motomura from Brazil were on this call, I think he would try to differentiate between the tangible and the intangible issues here. And you've touched on several. Both of you have touched on some of the intangible side of it. There's a great deal of emotional distress, at least in America right now. People don't know what to do with that distress. It's based on Thomas talking about what are the job opportunities of the future. We touched on AI last time we spoke. There's a great deal of fear. You have people in universities booing their commencement speakers when the commencement speakers talk about AI as an opportunity, but to the young people, it's a threat. You have people my age and our age who refuse to leave the workforce because they can't afford to, but they're clogging up jobs that young people would like to have. And so we've got a backlog of young people feeling that they don't have opportunity. These are these are issues of the soft side of life. Where do you find hope? Where do you find inspiration? Where do you feel opportunity? And I think we need to not only solve these systemic issues, Uffe, that you're talking about, and I want to comment on that in a minute. But we also have to be mindful that there is an emotional side to this equation.
Yeah, yeah.
Where if you give up hope, if you give up the historically the American dream, and the feeling that each generation will do better than its predecessors, and part of the responsibility of each generation is to make it create opportunities so that younger people can have a future that's better than the one we created for ourselves. Without that, I think the systemic issues are never going to be solved. You can't have people willing to try new things or experiment with new solutions if they don't have any sense that there's a point to this exercise beyond simply one day to the next. I also think, Uffe, you made a really good point about the being trapped in the systems of the past, any system of the past. The language we use right now is not accurate. And so when you say, here in America, I believe in general, it's very hard to use the word socialism as a non pejorative term. We have democratic socialist mayors, but socialism in the United States has never enjoyed the sense of welcome philosophy, economic philosophy that it has in other parts of the world. And I don't know that you can sell a socialist vision
Mm,
from as it was applied historically as a
mm,
solution to what we're dealing with right now. So it's not just the systems that don't apply, it's the language that we're
yeah.
struggling with. We don't have a language system that allows us to think differently and then come up
Mm,
with practical solutions that would work. Some of them are, I think you're right, Uffe. We need new solutions. We also need to go back and revisit what Franklin Roosevelt did when he became president and we were facing the last version of a collapse of capitalism. And he simply applied the tools that were already existing in the American system. He applied them in the interests of everyday working people.
mm,
He applied antitrust laws that Teddy Roosevelt had first institutionalized. He applied government job programs to put people to work so they could feel that their daily existence had value. There are tried and tested true solutions that we can revisit while we are also taking a little bit of time to think differently about the language, the systems, the psychology, and the underlying values of equal opportunity, education, health, well being, family. These things shouldn't be thrown out. These are still values that are our North Star. And if we collectively, with a sense of optimism, use some solutions from the past that work while we're inventing new systems at the same time, I don't think we end up in a place of despair or hopelessness. At least that's how I'm imagining it right now. Thomas, you had your
mm.
hand up.
Yeah, if I may add something, I mean, I agree on a couple of things and I disagree, obviously. Um, Speak about language. There is a system which is very successful and was founded in the 19th century, but it was reinvented all over the time, which is the system of cooperatives.
Mm,
And it started in the 19th century in agriculture because there was a big drought, and the problem was that the farmers themselves could not survive without help from outside. And there's the German guy Raiffeisen who said, "Listen, don't go and take loans from the bank or go to the aristocracy that they should help you. Start a cooperative." And I think the idea of the cooperative is interesting because it's a little bit different than a capital company. Because the idea of a cooperative, the main difference is, you have your business, Uwe has his business, I have my business, and we still are in our business, but we can share common infrastructure. So we share this podcast. That's sort of our cooperative. And everybody brings in something from his side, but the podcast itself is not our business, and we don't live from the podcast. So they share equipment, they share maybe a bank which they work with, or now this is huge, and they have insurance companies and media, real estate. I mean, it started to be enormously big. But the idea of a cooperative, I think, is an interesting way. It's from the past, but it's always evolving in new idea. And the cooperative itself does not pay dividends. To the members, because the members should make their business within what their core business is, but they can use the cooperative for buying together or having an infrastructure, IT together, even sometimes marketing. What you name it, it depends on the field. But I think it's a very interesting way of thinking. And what Uffe said, of course, private corporations have to much more cooperate with the state, and the state have to much more cooperate with corporations. And I'm an absolute believer of transnational cooperation. I mean, this is why I'm such a big fan of the European Union, with all the difficulties the European Union has, and probably still will have. But I mean, when I was born, it was impossible for Austria to become a member of the European Union, because we had the Cold War, we were neutral, it was against the constitution, and so on and so on, and we changed that. And the fact that I can now drive to Slovakia without a passport, or even Italy, which was a problem when I was born. My grandfather was in the war against Italy, and now we are within one entity. I mean, that's amazing. That's just a fantastic idea. I would love if Canada would join the European Union, for example, and since they have now a problem with the US. I think they share our values. They're very, very European. And I think we need this kind of organizations, transnational, with all the difficulties and dangers which they have. I think the United Nations has huge problems. It failed. It is not as important anymore as it used to be maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But the idea of people like Peter Thiel and this other people, the tech billionaires or now trillionaires, of having sort of small states that can transfer their money and avoiding taxes and no regulations, and wherever there's the less regulation, they move. That's bad. That's bad for the world. And I think, yes, we need to cooperate. But the fundamental idea of a capitalistic system, so that no pain, no gain, if you want, so, or you have to do something to earn something, I think that's a fundamental truth which, unfortunately, you cannot abolish.
But Uffe, didn't your political party, you started the Alternative in Denmark, and two of the building blocks were entrepreneurship and environmentalism. It was both green. It was both green and entrepreneurial. And is there something in that mix that points a way forward? Because in the United States, politically at least, historically, there was perceived to be a trade-off. You can't be a good, healthy environmentalist and be in favor of entrepreneurialism and startups and growing a business. Those are antithetical, but you brought them together in your political party as two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. But first of all, I think that what you said, Alan, about the need for a new language, and we have to be able to develop a new language that fits to what we're talking about, or what the future we are heading towards. I think that was a very important, input. So thank you for that. I think it's crucial to develop the language. And to make it concrete here is, when we talked about entrepreneurship, when we created the alternative, it was another way of understanding entrepreneurship, what motivates people to be entrepreneurial and to create. And that's where the language has been too simple, in my opinion, when we talk about entrepreneurship, because there's a classic way of talking about entrepreneurship that, and in the past it was always, there's a young man. Now, hopefully, there's also a young woman, but there's this archetype of an entrepreneur that gets a great idea, goes through a hell of a lot of trouble up the hill, and then succeed and earns a lot of money. So he's a really good example of an entrepreneur. But that's only one way of understanding what drives people to create. And when at the CARES Pilot, the program CARES Pilot program, Alan, you know that we had a broader understanding about what motivates people to create. And we developed a language saying that there's at least 6 archetypes of entrepreneurs. Yes, you have the businessman, businesswoman who are motivated about if I succeed, I'll get more money, and I can buy a house, I can secure that my kids get to a better education, whatever, and that's an important motivation. But you also have the mountain climber who are motivated about the challenge, and when he or she reaches the top, then figure out, okay, there are more mountain tops I would like to challenge. You have the creative kid who where the ideas pops up every second. You have the social entrepreneur who would like to create something that the local community supports. And so on and so on. We created a language which was much more diverse when we understood what entrepreneurship is and what motivates people to create. And the problem is that in the mainstream media and the mainstream business schools, you have only putting a focus on the business man woman's motivation pattern. And I want to say that for me, entrepreneurship is much more than just earning a lot of money. For me, entrepreneurship is about creating interesting solution on the problems we're facing. Entrepreneurship for me is to support my local community and get it to blossom. Entrepreneurship for me is to create an interesting work environment where everyone on the team, you talked about the team, Alan, before in the beginning, that you feel that you're part of a team, etc., etc. And for me, and that's a question to you, Alan, when you created Fast Company, I don't think that the main driver for you was to earn a lot of money when you sold it. I think that the reason why you wanted to create Fast Company was that you would like to create a business magazine that mirrors a new understanding about business. That was at least my take on it when I first read the first issue of Fast Company. That suddenly there was a medium that reflected my understanding about how business could look like and play a role in society. So just ending, saying that I totally agree. I think, Thomas, when you talked about cooperatives, I think that's part of to get a new take on what we're talking about. And there's a lot to learn from the history. Denmark wouldn't have looked like Denmark looks if it was not created from the basic, from the basic, how should I describe it? That ordinary people got together in meaningful communities to solve the problems they were facing. And Thomas, you talked about the farmer situation. It was exactly the same in Denmark. So what you saw was that people came together, formed meaningful communities to solve concrete problems. It was not something coming top down from the prime minister. It was people in the communities saying, we have to face this issue. How
Very,
can we
very entrepreneurial.
organize? Yeah. They were, in my opinion, it was entrepreneurial, but it was not motivated about greed
Right.
and being a trillionaire as Musk. It's the way.
No, yeah.
Anyway, I'll stop here.
Well,
I just
just to
got
add something, I think I mean, I think we have a common ground here. I wrote a book about this. What really matters to you. I really think that nobody no good businessman or woman starts a business by what can I do to earn $50 million. That's not a business plan. The business plan is that you have an idea to make a difference, to have something which is unique, to have a purpose in thing. And then if it makes money, great. Of course, you have to make money, otherwise it fails and the idea is gone. But I absolutely agree that you have to have a purpose and you have to have something where you really believe that this makes a difference in the community. It doesn't have to be a moral cause. It can be also an interesting benefit. It could be the fastest car in the world or rocket or whatever. But it has to have a clear, distinctive purpose. And this is I absolutely agree on.
Yeah, Uffe, your description of the origin of Fast Company is totally accurate. And our even in our first editorial that Bill and I wrote, we talked about the world is changing and business is changing the world, and it was our responsibility to think differently about how business can be a benefit to everyone in the world. I want to. We're going to end up here real quick, but I want to introduce one other idea, and that is the stories that we tell each other to make sense of the world are another way to change the dialogue, change the conversation. That was another part of the Fast Company mantra: was if you want to change the world, you have to change the conversation. You
Mm.
have to think. And I was reminded yesterday. I was talking to a friend here in Santa Fe. I was reminded of an article that I worked on years ago at the Harvard Business Review with my friend Robert Reich. Robert had looked at the uh, inaugural addresses of American presidents and come up with a variety of themes that were uh, always running in American narratives. And there was a dichotomy. There's a dichotomy that I want to focus on very briefly. It's that you can think about it in terms of movies, if it helps. There's the movie in which John Wayne is the hero, and it's about the individual who goes out and conquers the wilderness or saves the struggling person from disaster, but it's always the heroic individual, and that's an American story. But there's another American story about the compassionate village. It's in that Christmas movie we watch every year. It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey is about to lose everything, but the town comes together and everybody contributes something, puts money in the pot. So at the end of the story, George Bailey is rescued by the village that loves him enough so that everybody puts some money in the pot to save George from going to jail. And the family is together, and the town is together, and the people are together. And it's this sense of community well-being, not one individual who makes all the difference, but the town as a community coming together. And those stories are both inherent in the American story. And sometimes we tell one story, and other times we tell a different story. Herbert Hoover, when he was president, told the story of the individual, and we're facing a depression. Tough luck. Go sell apples. Franklin Roosevelt becomes president, and he says, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself. We are in this together. We will solve this together." And I think we see these cycles in history. We see these stories rising and falling in time. I think we need to find new language, new stories, some old solutions applied in new ways, and some new solutions that fit the moment we're in, that allows for entrepreneurial problem solving of serious social, environmental, economic, and emotional issues that are global. They're not unique to any one country. So why don't we call it a great
Hell
session?
yeah.
I love talking with you guys. You are such I feel very fortunate that we're friends. It makes my day better
Me
to know
too.
that we're all drinking from the same well, and
Yeah.
we're all in this together. So thank you. We'll schedule another one in the future. Thomas, good luck in the World Cup. Uffe,
Thank
start
you.
kicking the ball. Stop kicking the ball back to the goalie. That's illegal now. You can't do that. I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, Adam Weber, for hosting us today. We love you.
Thank you, Adam.
Bye, everybody.
Og Klinsmann ind igen der. Lige markerer. Juni 1992 EM-finalen 1-0 til Danmark. Der er spillet godt 19 minutter af anden halvleg. Så han kan ikke se noget, hvis han sidder ned. Det er hans egne ord. Så kan han heller ikke mærke om sig. For nu af, så ved man aldrig, hvad der kan ske i et EM. Men det har virkelig givet dem problemer. Og den er hjemme, Flemming. Jeg tror det. Det kan ikke klippe nu. Er du pessimist? Jamen, jeg er ved at gøre noget inde i bukserne i øjeblikket.